What's up, guys? Welcome back to another video. Today we are going to be doing a author review specifically on Sarah Dessen. I had mentioned earlier when I was doing my monthly reading wrap up that I had read her most recent book, which is Change of Plans. It is a book that I have been waiting for, quite frankly, and I was a little surprised by how formulaic it felt, and that was very disappointing. But I didn't feel like that was fair to the author because I genuinely feel like she is one of my favorite young adult coming of age storytellers, and so I thought it would be wonderful to do a book review of all of her different books, little snippets on each of the books, as well as my thoughts around her writing as a whole. If that sounds like something you may enjoy, definitely stick around for the video. It's reading time here at JBay's Corner. For those of you that are new here, welcome. My name is Jaya. I put out videos every Wednesday and Sunday, primarily on bookish related content, and I love anything fiction. I genuinely have a slight unhealthy addiction to books, as you can see with the bookshelves behind me, and this is not even all of the books. So it is ridiculous. I also have a collector's mentality, so I do tend to collect a lot of the special editions and beautiful books. However, I do actually read them. So that is the only redeeming quality that I would say there is to that. Of course, there's so many different ways to consume books: libraries, Libby, Audible, so many options, Kindle, Nook, that I don't think we need to necessarily have a ton of physical books anymore, but they're just so pretty. And I fully realize how shallow that sounds. That being said, I do thoroughly enjoy being in this room, getting the energy from these books, and sharing my love for books with all of you. If that sounds like something fun and you think you may enjoy indulging in my ridiculousness, then definitely consider being part of the bookish community here where we talk all things books. We would love to have you be part of the family. For those of you that are returning, thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for putting up with my shenanigans. Thank you so much for joining me on this reading journey. It means the absolute world to me. Like, I cannot thank each and every one of you enough for taking time out of your busy days to sit here and talk books with me. And that being said, let's jump into the video. The first book that I wanted to talk about is Keeping the Moon. Now, this is one of Sarah Dessen's older books. This was released, when was this released? Back early 2000s, I want to say. Maybe even earlier than that? We are going to find out. Specifically, this book was released in 1999, so this is an older book. So anyone who decides they want to read these, just keep that in mind. These are written from back in the day when I was still in high school, so it's been a long time, but there's just something so beautiful about the way Sarah Dessen writes. Keeping the Moon is following the story of a young woman who was overweight for the majority of her life. It was just her and her mother. Her mother also used to be super, super overweight. They were living in their car, essentially, like consistently on the road. And finally, her mother joins a weight loss group, and she ends up becoming a phenomenal, not only member, but an instructor as well. She ends up building an empire for herself with her weight loss journey, and she essentially helps her daughter lose all the weight that she had too. But the daughter doesn't really know who she is at this point because she's still living a nomadic life. She hasn't really connected with her father, and she feels like the closeness she used to have with her mother has changed ever since she became an internet phenomenon, and now she's just trying to find her place. Sometimes she feels like she even misses the layers that she had because it was a protective layer, and now that everything is skinny and on display, she doesn't quite know who she is. She finds herself then in Colby, North Carolina, where she ends up working at the Last Chance Bar and Grill and meets a very quirky crew of characters, and she slowly realizes who she is as an individual. Now, the thing I love about these books is while they do oftentimes have a romance in them, it also shows a lot of female friendships. It shows a lot of internal struggle of the young adult, like teenage girl character as well. And it really shows them coming into themselves, regardless of whether or not there's a man in their life, which I think is what I love about these books. And in this book in particular, I love the relationship that our main character, Collie, has with Morgan and Isabel, and the fellow waitresses that she meets at the cafe. And then I also love the relationship she ends up creating with her boyfriend in the book. And it's also really beautiful to see her find her sense of place and family, because the whole reason they end up in Blue Moon is because she is there to meet her aunt Mira, who is essentially a window into the past of what her life used to look like. And now she finally has an opportunity to really figure out who she is as a person with the new shiny new her that she is, and the old girl that she feels like is now missing and is not allowed to come out and is not allowed to be seen because of the influencer vibes of her mother. So as you can see, there's a lot of deep concepts that are actually explored in this book, and it's actually pretty short. It's not that long of a book, and I feel like you can fly through this book. This was 228 pages. Absolutely amazing. Loved this book. In the previous book, we obviously talked a little bit about weight and its impact on a young girl's development. And I feel like Sarah Dessen has a way of talking about these things that are overbranchingly very large and can really impact a young woman's life as they're going through their formative years. And this Lullaby is no different. In this book, we are following the story of Remy. She's watching her mother go through her 5th marriage, and she's extremely focused on her career, on her life, and she's very anti-romance because she feels like it never works out anyways. Her mother, I believe, is also an author, and Remy is just at a point where she's like, you know, boyfriends come and go. You can wear them like gloves and then you take them off, discard them, and keep going because you can't trust a man. And then all of a sudden she ends up meeting Dexter. Dexter, I believe, is a musician and he is a hot mess. He is still trying to figure out his life, but he is one of those where he just won't let Remy go. And his cast and crew of friends are also absolutely ridiculous. And throughout the course of this story, we see Remy break down her walls and realize that it's okay to allow love into your life, and also find a sense of peace with the decisions that her mother's made and all the men that have trampled through their life that has caused disruption. We also see Remy kind of revert back into the role of being a daughter and a child rather than consistently being the one who's picking up the pieces whenever her mother's marriages fall apart. And so just such a beautiful book in general, really showcasing the relationship between a mother and a daughter, the impact a parent's relationships may have on their children, as well as learning the true meaning of having people stick by you and fight for you when you feel like no one is capable of doing so. Outside of that, we also get to see Remy come out of her shell as well, which was really beautiful. This book overall, I feel like, and I also realized I didn't give you a star rating for Keeping the Moon. Keeping the Moon was probably a solid 3.5, 4-star read for me. This one was probably the same, about a 3.5 and 4-star read. And that's not to say that these books are not excellent. It's just that there's so many Sarah Dessen books that I love more that hit harder that this ends up being a 3.5, 4-star book, but just an absolutely lovely coming of age story. Along for the Ride is a title that you may have heard before. It was actually adapted into a TV series and it had rave reviews when it first came out. This one is probably one of my absolute favorites in the Sarah Dessen world. In this series, but in this particular book, we're following the character of Auden. Auden is perfect at everything. She's the perfect daughter. She is the perfect girl at school. She has the best grades. She's valedictorian. She's got her life set for her. And she's dealing with 2 parents that act like children. Her mother is a professor at a college and is actually sneaking around with her TAs and stuff like that, and has this expectation of Auden to be perfect, but she's also not the most loving and warm mother. While she is there to take care of Auden, there's a lot of push for her to be perfect. And then on the flip side, we have Auden's father, who's recently married to a new woman with an infant, and all he wants to do is write his book. He blames the relationship he had with Auden's mother, as well as the fact that he wasn't capable of writing when Auden was a little girl, as the reason that he hasn't been successful. But he's a professor at a university, and Auden starts to notice similar patterns when she goes home to see her father and his new bride, and finds that once again she notes that the stepmother has been left alone with a baby while her father is basically sitting in an office trying to quote unquote write a novel. Auden then doesn't know what to do with herself. She comes from a perfect, pristine life and she's thrown into this chaos role. And in the process of doing so, she ends up working at her stepmother's store since her stepmother is unable to run the store herself. It's a colorful, beautiful, summery vibe clothing store, and the girls who work there are absolutely wonderful. And she also ends up meeting the boys next door who are part of a bike shop. And in the process of doing all of this, Auden realizes that one of the bike guys, Eli, is a insomniac, just like she is. And so they end up hanging out quite a bit every night, and she slowly starts to let her walls down and her guards down and just enjoys being a little kid just for a little bit. And then as the book proceeds, we also see the resolution that takes place between her and her family, and we see the parents finally take responsibility for their roles and actions. And Auden also even has an opportunity to really bury the hatchet with her older brother, whom she absolutely loves, but had the right to gallivant around the world while she was expected to be absolutely perfect at home. So very, very beautiful story, coming of age story. We really get to see Auden blossom as a person, as an individual. And we really get to see her create a new relationship with her stepmother when she didn't know where she stood. We get to see her bond with her new baby sister, half sister. And we also get to see her fix her relationship with her parents and really, really just learn to soar. Absolutely beautiful book. Loved, loved, loved this book. I ended up giving this one a solid 4.5 stars. The Moon and More. What can I say about this book? This book is about a girl who grows up in a small beach town where basically tourist season is where they make the most of their money. And there's a concept of tourist relationships. In the course of this book, she ends up meeting Theo, who is a New York filmmaker who has come to basically enjoy his summer. And he comes across Emmeline. He thinks she's absolutely wonderful and that she's absolutely hung the moon. And they start basically spending their summer romance together. However, as the book progresses, we realize that Emmeline is also trying to figure out where her future and dreams may point. Does she want to stay in the small town and continue down the path that's expected for her? Does she want to stay and help run the shop that her parents own? And does she want to help work in the inn that is in that town? Does she want to stay close to her friend who is a fashion designer that just wants to stay nearby so she can close to her boyfriend? Or does she want to shoot for the moons and stars? And is Theo opening up a world before her eyes that she may not have otherwise thought was available to her? In this book, we really see Emmeline struggle with the idea of wanting to be at home and exactly who she is and stay in the safety net of what she knows versus the adventure and exploration of looking outside, but maybe just a little bit putting your heart on the line and being alone and away from everything that you know. It's a beautiful story that we really get to see Emmeline kind of blossom and grow in the course of this story. This is one of the books that did come out later in the course of the Sarah Dessen releases. I believe this one came out 2013, so this was definitely one of her more recent works. You can definitely tell from the way that the writing is done. I would say this one is quite enjoyable. It is a lovely story, as I mentioned. I ended up giving this a 3 star only because personally for me, Emmeline was not a character that I could fully relate to, but I do think that the character is well developed and the story was well written, and I would encourage everyone to pick it up if you're in the mood for a good beach summer read. Lock and Key is probably one of my absolute favorite books of Sarah Dessen. In this book, we are following the story of Ruby. Ruby is used to taking care of herself. Her mother has kind of been absent her whole life. Sometimes she disappears for days on end. Ruby's used to cooking for herself, cleaning for herself, and essentially living in her home alone until someone discovers that her mother has been extremely negligent, and now Ruby finds herself being forced to live with her older sister and her new husband. However, the problem is she and her sister have not been close in years, especially since Ruby feels like she has been abandoned by her older sister. It also turns out that there's been no communication between the two of them for almost 10 years, and now Ruby is just at a loss as to what is expected of her and what she's supposed to do. By moving in with her sister, she's also forced to go to the fancy school that her sister lives nearby rather than the high school that she's been attending, and she's forced to leave her boyfriend, her best friends, her friends, family, everyone behind in order to start this new journey. The only thing that seems to make it a little bit tolerable is the adorable cheerleader golden retriever boy who lives next door, who may just be hiding a little secret of his own as well. Between the two of them, Ruby and our lovely boy next door are able to really figure out that just because it seems like roses are blooming and everything looks perfect doesn't mean that there's thorns not pricking everyone in their own different ways. This book is absolutely beautiful. It is such a lovely coming of age story. You really get to see the relationship between the two sisters blossom. You get to see Ruby learn to trust adults in her life. You get to see her kind of grow into someone who's kind and open-hearted and finds people that truly love her for her rather than being prickly and feeling like she has to consistently be on guard just to survive. And this book is one of those books where it's absolutely heart-wrenchingly painful to read because of the situation that Ruby's mother puts her in, but it's also beautiful to see her get that second chance as she gains the new key to her new life and home. Absolutely recommend this book. This was probably one of my absolute favorite Sarah Dessen books. This is a solid 4.5-star reads for me. Saint Anything is an absolutely, sorry, I'm drinking water. That's why there's that little fleck there. Saint Anything is an incredible book. In this book, we are following the story of a young woman who is living with her parents, and her brother has always been the problem child. He has been in and out of jail and juvie and all kinds of things and consistently finds himself in trouble. So the only thing Sydney has ever done is to try to keep her head low and live outside of the spotlight. She is consistently forced to be around her brother's friend, who is very creepy, has a girlfriend, but is consistently skeeving on her. And while she consistently notes this concern to her brother and her parents, they just kind of ignore her, shake it off, because they're just like, he's done so much for her older brother. And Sydney just doesn't know where her place is. She's gotten so used to being a wallflower and so used to being perfect that she doesn't know what her role as an individual is. And she doesn't know if she's going to get the chance to explore that. Enter the Chathams, who open the local pizza place. And there's Layla, who is absolutely wonderful. She is, I believe, the owner of the store. And then we have Rosie and Mac. Now, Mac is the one that she really creates a relationship with, and she starts to realize that maybe it's okay to sometimes voice your own opinions and not be perfect all the time. This book was one of those books that was just gut-wrenchingly beautiful. Family dynamics are really explored in this book as well, and we really get to see what it means to consistently live in the shadow of an older sibling that may have taken away your right to childhood by accident, and that resolution that Sydney ends up finding through the course of this book, and the fact that certain events happen that lead to her family finally realizing that maybe just a little bit they've been neglecting their daughter. It's a beautiful story to read, and not neglect in the sense that they didn't clothe her and, you know, provide for her and take care of her, but just they didn't realize the emotional strain that she was going through. And I think this is a really beautiful story, because so many times you're in a situation where you feel like you are expected to be a certain way or live a certain way in order to maintain an image or a prestige. And in that, you end up lying so much to yourself and those around you that sometimes people forget that you may have a voice. And I think this book really captures that concept, and it really shows the journey of Sydney in such a beautiful way. And this was also definitely one of my absolute favorite books. This is a solid 4-star read for me. Just Listen. As I had mentioned before, all of these books do deal with some kind of hard subject matter, and Just Listen is definitely one of them. We are talking about a young woman, Annabelle, who has had the picture perfect life. Her older sisters are beautiful and rail thin. They got into modeling, and because of their journey through modeling, now Annabelle is in modeling as well. She's done commercials and things like that. She was always one of the popular girls in school until all of a sudden she wasn't. Her best friend Sophie turned on her, basically isolated her, and makes her feel like she's worthless. She's walking into her senior year feeling completely dejected and broken, and it is because something awful and terrible has happened to her. I will say, trigger warnings, this book does deal with rape. In the course of the book, she ends up meeting Owen. Owen, who is someone who has gone through anger management and is just someone who has no filter. He only believes in telling the truth, whether it may hurt or not hurt someone, because he feels like that is the only way that you can avoid unnecessary conflict, because you are forced to deal with resolutions right away. Annabelle, on the other hand, who's living a life of a shell, of a lie, because she doesn't want to upset the balance for everyone, finds herself in a position where she doesn't know what to do with that. And the only person who truly allows Annabelle to be exactly who she is Owen and his family. Throughout the course of this book, we finally see her get justice for what has happened to her, and we see that her family kind of rallies around her in a way that maybe she wasn't anticipating would happen. And throughout the course of the book, we also learned that her older sister has gone through anorexia and is struggling in her own way. And so she's just trying to be as quiet and a wallflower as much as possible. But she realizes that people have depth and people have capacity. And just because they may be hurting, it doesn't mean that they can't be there for you. The found family in this, the reconciliation with her own family, as well as the justice for the pain that has been inflicted on her against her will, is just very, very well written, and this is again one of my absolute favorite books. This is probably a solid 5-star read for me, and this was what first introduced me to Sarah Dessen and got me obsessed with her writing. As we were talking about some of the books that are a little bit more intense with Sarah Dessen's writing, there is one novel that I no longer own that is absolutely phenomenal and has to be spoken about, and that is Dreamland. Dreamland is a novel that is written by Sarah Dessen that deals with abusive relationships. In the course of that book, we see a girl who finds herself in a very painful, abusive relationship. She has family members who are also going through this, and it's really about breaking the cycle and finding your own voice. That book absolutely destroyed me. The number of times I cried reading that book, the number of times I just felt it hit in such a deep and provoking way was amazing. But it was also one of those books where I knew I would never read it again. And so I did end up rehoming that book. But I just wanted to definitely give a shout out to the book Dreamland. It is absolutely phenomenal. It was a solid 5-star read. It is one of those books that will make you feel everything under the sun as our young main character finds out how to navigate toxic relationships. Next up, I did want to talk about The Truth About Forever. This is my absolute favorite Sarah Dessen book. I am now 35 and I still pick this up today and read my favorite chapters. It is one of those books that is so wholesome and so gut-wrenchingly beautiful that I just am obsessed with it. It's just a very simple story. We're following the story of a young girl who is an athlete, and she's been in a relationship that has just allowed her to sink into a safety space, and she knows exactly what's expected of her. Her mom, expects her to be the perfect golden child. Her sister was the wild, crazy one, and she's now moved out and is getting married and is moving on with her life. This young girl's best friend in the whole wide world was her father, and she ends up not going on a run with him one morning when he drops dead. And she can't help but believe that it was her fault, that if she had been there, maybe she could have prevented the heart attack, maybe she could have called 911 sooner. And she's still reeling from that, when all of a sudden, as the end of their senior year approaches and college is about to start, her boyfriend decides that it's time for them to take a break because he feels like they are too attached at the hip and they need to figure out what comes next. In the course of all of this, Macy is just astray. She doesn't know what to do with herself. And her mom ends up throwing a party because she's a realtor. And during this event that's happening, Macy notices that the catering staff is really struggling. So she ends up tying an apron around her and, her shoulder and her waist. And she decides to step in and help as much as possible. And she suddenly finds herself with a job. Now, throughout the course of the book, she meets a set of characters that are absolutely beautiful. The owner of the Wishbone Catering is absolutely amazing. She also has lost her sister, and she knows what it feels like to lose a loved one, and she's also pregnant and very emotional, and she's just trying to keep it together by a thread. Meanwhile, her 2 nephews, who help out so much with the business, Wes and Bart, are absolutely incredible. Wes is supposed to be one of the sexiest, god-looking men in the planet, but he hates when women approach him, and he doesn't like being treated like an object. And since Macy is still heartbroken, she's not swooning in quite the same way that other women have, and so Wes and Macy actually end up forming a friendship that grows throughout the course of the book. And then we also see Macy become friends with some amazing female characters. One of them in particular, she is a mess in her own right, and she jumps from relationship to relationship, and she was in a horrible car accident that scarred her face, and she doesn't let it bring her down in any way, shape, or form. She absolutely is on the journey to find the perfect dateable guy, and she's convinced she's going to drag Macy along with her. Her older sister is one of those girls who is just monotone, very quiet, very punk rock, very goth chick. And even so, the 2 sisters are completely different. They are totally there for each other and absolutely love each other. And this Wishbone crew is just such an amazing found family, and it's just beautiful to see. Macy's resolution with her sister and her mother is also really incredible to see. And the final showdown between Macy and her ex-boyfriend is also very eye-opening and very well written, in the sense that neither of them meant to harm each other, but Macy has now found a sense of self and a sense of direction, and no longer needs to hide in a relationship, but rather wants to be in a relationship that helps her soar. Also, Wes was a runner and Macy was a runner. Ever since her father died, she stopped. And so Wes is the one who convinces her to get back into the running. Overall, it's just such a beautiful journey to see. And I love the relationship that Wes and Macy have. I love the fact that even though Wes is seen as a bad boy because of all the experiences he went through and the acting out he did after his mother died, he's actually such an amazing person at heart. And I love that Macy and him bond over their trauma and are able to help each other heal. It is just such a beautiful book. It is absolutely one of my all-time favorites. This is like a 10-star read for me. I will continue to read this. I hope they make this into a movie or a TV show. Like, I just love this set of characters and I highly, highly recommend. Change of Plans is Sarah Dessen's newest book. I did end up reading this summer. I was very excited for it, and I did end up giving my thoughts. She has not written in a very long time, so I'm very excited to see that she's writing again, and I anticipate I will still pick up any Sarah Dessen book that comes out, even if I'm well into my 50s or 60s. And it's just because she has a beautiful way of telling a coming of age story. However, I will say Change of Plans has probably been my least favorite book that she has written. It is just one of those books where I feel like it was lacking in some form, and it was only because it felt like it was a compilation of a bunch of her other books put together. And I just felt like there was so much more that could have been discovered in this book, particularly between the relationship between the main female character and her mother, as well as her relationship with her sense of self. I also wanted to see a better resolution between her and the ex-boyfriend, which I feel like I didn't really get. So that was really frustrating, and I really hated the main guy in this book, which is unheard of for me because every Sarah Dessen guy I have loved. They're so supportive, they're so kind, they're there as a side character to really allow the girl to grow, and I feel like that's not the vibe I got from the main character in this book. I still love the motley crew that's created in the cafe. I love the small town vibes of this book, but I just felt like it wasn't her best. And that's not to say that it's not going to be amazing for many other readers. I think just for me, what I was anticipating and what I got were not exactly what I was expecting. But that is also, all of this is to be taken with a grain of salt because I went in with very, very high expectations for this book. So it could also just be me, but this unfortunately was a 2-star read for me. I also wanted to mention another Sarah Dessen book that I don't actually own, and that would be That Summer. In that book, we follow the story of a young girl kind of figuring out how to navigate her sister's wedding. She also has a loved one that was lost in an accident, and she's trying to figure out how to move past that event. It's very emotional, it's very raw. However, it was Sarah Dessen's first novel, so just take it with a grain of salt. You do get a lot more teenage angst in that one. And it wasn't one that necessarily hit home for me. It was probably another solid 2.5, 3-star read, but not because it was a bad book in any way, shape, or form. It was just not one that really resonated with me. And again, you could tell the author was very young when she started writing with that book, but I still think it's worth picking up and reading if you're just looking for a cute summer read. The next book I wanted to talk about is What Happened to Goodbye. This is also one of those books that I absolutely love. This is about a young girl who lives with her father, who is a chef. Her mother ended up basically cheating on her dad and getting married and has twins, and so she doesn't know how to relate to her mom or how to be close to her mom. McLean is just trying to figure out what the next step is, and she feels like she needs to be with her dad because she needs to show him that she's there for him and she supports him and she loves him. And McLean's dad basically is a phenomenal chef, and he ends up going to various restaurants that are on the brink of closure and will basically help them revamp their menu. He's also a very good-looking man, and he oftentimes finds himself in new relationships. And then just as the time that the restaurant takes off, the relationship also tends to fizzle out, and so he and McLean end up moving to a new city. Now, throughout this process, because McLean has moved so many times and she's not super close with her mom, even though she used to be, and she doesn't know how to bridge that gap without betraying her dad, and because she wants to be there for her father but is consistently put in a new school and a new setting, she decides she's going to try on different personalities. So in one school she'll be the perky cheerleader, in another school she will be the goth, and every single time she reinvents herself, she comes up with a new name for the persona that she's created, and all of her yearbooks also reflect this. And finally she finds herself in a city where her father has settled in to a restaurant, and McLean accidentally introduces herself as herself. And so this is the first time ever in years that she has to figure out who she is as a person and an individual. It is also the final culmination where she is forced to reconcile with her parents, and they also realize the effect their divorce has had on their daughter and the consistent moves have had on their daughter as well. Absolutely a phenomenal book. Love the motley crew of characters, love the school that she goes to, love McLean, just absolutely obsessed with this book. This was a solid 5-6 star read for me. It was probably one of my second favorites in terms of Sarah Dessen's books. The Truth About Forever is always going to be my favorite, but this is definitely number 2. The rest of the story is following the story of a young woman named Emma, who is a single parent child. Her mother died when she was 12 years old, and she's not very close to her mother's side of the family. She's very close to her father, and she knows exactly what's expected of her with her father's side of the family. But then one year they end up going for a summer to Northlake, which is where her mother's family is from. And when she goes there, she realizes that everyone there treats her a little bit differently and calls her by the name that her mother used to call her, which is Sailor. And she finds herself really trying to figure out what her mother's life meant. Her father comes from a business world and is very well off and comes from that posh kind of culture, but her mother grew up in a small town touristy vibe and was very much a Northlake Shore girl before the two of them had met and decided to get married. And through the course of this, she starts to discover roots in her history that she wouldn't have otherwise had an opportunity to explore, and also helps her define herself in these pieces that are missing in terms of who her mother was and what her mother may have brought to the table, because her mother dies when our main character was 12 years old. As Sailor / Emma is trying to figure out, what her role is, she also ends up meeting the cute boy next door, Rue, who also used to be her childhood best friend. And as the two of them reconnect and start rekindling their friendship, he also assists in her figuring out the history of her past and her family. And Emma finds herself in a position where she now has to bridge the two sides together. Lovely story, very, very sweet, very summery romance, very, very cute coming of age story. I ended up giving this one a solid 3.5 stars. Last but definitely not least, we have Once and For All by Sarah Dessen. In this book, we are following the story of, what is our main character's name? Launa. And Launa helps her mother with creating happily ever afters for multiple other people. They're essentially in the wedding business. And so because she's seen so many marriages that have been successful but also torn apart, and because she's seen her mother go through, the worst breakup, and because her mother is like really struggling with finding love herself, Launa has decided that love and marriage is not for her. Enter Ambrose, the funny, quirky character that she ends up meeting in the course of planning a wedding, who describes himself as a serial dater. He believes in love, he believes everyone has something to offer, and he now has his eyes set on Launa. And the two of them start exploring this idea of maybe it is worthwhile to committing to just one person in case of Ambrose, and in Launa's case, maybe it's okay to open up your heart a little bit. She also gets to see her mother and her best friend kind of navigate relationships and love and marriage, and she starts to realize that maybe her mother isn't as cynical about love as she thinks, and Launa really has to face the fact that maybe it's fear that's holding her back from finding the perfect love and story for herself, and sometimes it's not about the destination but the journey itself. Absolutely sweet, adorable story. Again, perfect summer read. This was a solid 3-star read for me. And that does bring me to the end of this video. I hope you guys enjoyed this one. Sarah Dessen is definitely one of those authors who has been in my life for the past 10 years, and I didn't feel like it was fair to just do the one review I did for her and leave it there, because she deserves so much more. She's just one of those authors that's been with me through childhood and coming of age, and whether I was in high school or whether I was in, college or med school or even now as an adult, I feel like there's something you can take away from her writing for everybody. She's just such a hopeful writer, and I feel like she definitely has a way of capturing the spirit of the youth in her novels, and she really knows how to tell the tale of that female distress and talks about some very important, challenging things that kids face, whether it be dealing with parents' divorce or watching them go through multiple marriages, or best friends being betrayers, or whether it's like dealing with the difficulty of a older sibling who is disappointing, or whether it be, dealing with rape or abusive relationships. She just has a way of capturing so many stories in such a positive light, and she has a way of making the stories light and beautiful while still dealing with these difficult concepts. And I just think that she should be celebrated. While I do say that I was disappointed in her most recent book, as I mentioned before, I do see myself reading Sarah Dessen in the future, and she will always be a 5-star author for me. That being said, I do hope you guys enjoyed this video. For those of you that are new here, thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much if you made it to the end. I appreciate you taking the time to watch this video, and it would mean the absolute world to me if you enjoyed the video. If you want to consider being a part of our community, we put out videos every Wednesday and Sunday on bookish related content, and I love a conversation and a discussion. So let me know what you thought. Give me your comments below. Do you see yourself ever reading Sarah Dessen? Have you read any of her books? Are there any other authors you would recommend that I read based on my thoughts on this author? Let me know. For those of you that are returning, I cannot thank you enough. I would not be able to do this without each and every one of you. It is so special to build this community with you guys and to find like-minded people who have a love for the art form of writing and reading. And I can honestly say that, you know, I am so thankful that you guys take the time to do this with me, because I do realize time is precious and everyone's lives are busy, and so it just means the world. That being said, I hope wherever you guys are in the world, whether it's morning, evening, or night, that you're getting plenty of time to rest, relax, and read, and that you're surrounded by love, happiness, and safety. I'll catch you guys on the next video. Bye.